why isn't there freedom in education? And that's when
Hello and welcome to a very new episode of the Design Bear Talk. I'm your host Jagat Singh Lamba, and before we start this episode today, I have a question for the viewers. What does a fashion designer do once they graduate? Work at an architecture firm? Design a curriculum? I know that sounds strange and extraordinary, but that's exactly who our guest is today. Her name is Mridu Sahai, who has done her bachelor's in fashion from NIFT Delhi and pursued her postgrad in creative arts London. She's a partner at Arcom Consults, who works at multiple levels such as finance, publication, HR, etc. To add to her achievements, she's also the co-founder of the Design Village. Thank you so much, Mridu, for joining us here today. I mean, I was reading about you so much, and I must say what an impressive journey you've had till now.
Thanks, Jugad. That was a very generous introduction, but I think I just went with the flow.
So, I want to know that how has the definition of design sort of changed with experience? Because after you graduated from NIFT Delhi, you must have had a lot of experiences when you went to postgrad to London, and then when you finally went into an architecture firm working as a designer, and now you're a co-founder of the Design Village. So how has the definition of design changed over the years?
To be very frank, when I was in school, the reason I chose design was because people sought my opinions on what they would wear. And it's as frivolous as that. At that time, I thought that, okay, maybe, there is an opinion that I have that can make people look good. And that's why I chose fashion. When I came to NIFT, I realized, of course, it opened my mind a lot to what is the art of the possible in the gamut of fashion. But it was always very manifestation dependent. Like clothes were what you would make, or products were what you would make. When I went to do my master's, I think there was a big shift, I would say, in my mentality as well as maybe in the world as well. I was more receptive to what was going on in the world, and I realized that design is it's not a noun, it's not a product. Design is a way of life, is a way to look at things, and that's when I think the shift happened, that it was all about being a verb. And today when I with Arcom, with the Design Village, I see that the definition of design is completely evolved. It's about, of course, solving problems of today, but also about envisioning new futures. And it has really, the manifestation is just, it's a tool. It's not like what design can do. And so it's been a revelation in my journey. And I'm sure it's the same for a lot of us who are in this field and who are in design thinking and a multidisciplinary setup.
So you did your undergrad in New Delhi, and then you went to Creative Arts London. So what was the key difference you saw in the curriculum, in the way of teaching, or the space that they were teaching in? So what was the key difference?
So at NIFT New Delhi, of course, we were in a campus that was designed by B.V. Doshi. And, it's in the center of town. Hoskas is very thriving. It's a design hub. So it was very interesting. And, of course, you could learn a lot from your context as well. I remember in NIFT, we would sit at the Kund, and that's where all the life would happen. And that's very, very similar to how things happen at TDV, where the think tank or the Kund is everything for people to meet. But when I went to the UK, I realized a couple of things. Like Indian students, maybe it's the way we've been brought up. It's very spoon-fed.
Right.
And my time in the UK was all about being extremely independent, understanding what is your voice, what do you believe in. So, at a meta level, it was really about how you grow as a person and understand that, okay, what is your value system in the realm of design or otherwise. And I think that shift happened because of the stark difference between the two contexts that I, experienced or lived in.
So you mentioned the space or the Kund that you said that you had in your college. So my question is that what is that? How important is interaction when it comes to design, or what is the level of interaction you need in order to work in multiple groups and work together as a team, and how important is it?
Right. So interesting. I think this is where architecture and design meet, because at Arcom also, we always believe that you always need to design the in-between spaces, the spaces that are unimportant to a layperson, because those are the places where chance encounters take place, which is like the canteen, and I don't know if you've seen the TDV campus
Right.
currently. It is really good. It's replete with steps,
Right.
going up, ascending, descending. It is really the spaces and not the classrooms or the lecture halls that, is where the magic happens. And
Right.
yeah, and that is something, yeah, as an architect, as a wannabe architect, or as a partner at an architecture practice, I feel that the space is a teacher, and the environment that you are in has so much to do with the way you develop.
Right.
And yeah, and when I was in NIFT, I didn't realize at the time that it was designed by Mr. Doshi, and frankly, it may not be my most favorite project of his, but I realized the intent of which it was designed now, because I'm in this journey of space design, multidisciplinary, where
Right.
I realized, yeah, the ecosystem is a teacher.
So, what brought you into education at the first place, and how does it drive you or motivate you each and every day to work towards it? I mean, it is something, it is a field that you have not had much of an experience earlier, and since you're a fashion graduate, what got you in the education system, and
Right.
what were the gaps that you saw in the education system that you felt that need to be bridged, and how was that entire?
So I think it happened really serendipitously. It was not something that was planned. When I came back from the UK, I realized that I was not done with education. Personally, I
Right.
as a person, I still wanted to be on a learning journey. And yeah, when I came back, I realized that I don't want to start practicing right from start. And again, yes, like we said, that why can't we bring that interdisciplinary flavor? Why is it that a fashion designer is always expected to only make clothes?
Right.
Why can't, why isn't there freedom in education? And that's when I met Saurabh, and he shared this belief. We met a couple of other colleagues of mine, Siddharth, Isha, who were there at the time. Again, one was from a product background, one was from an architecture background, and who were thinking the same things, that why are we all so siloed in the way we, look at things or do things. And yeah, that collective energy just brewed, and yeah, today we've strived to make a design institute which is very inclusive, I would say. It's a very inclusive institute that lets you choose. And yeah, that's the main thing I missed as a person who was from India, that choice is so harsh right now. If for any competitive exam, maybe it's because of our population, you have to choose either the city you'll study in or the course.
Right.
And you can never shift from one to the other.
Right.
And all those constraints were really, it's liberating now to be able to offer something to students that is, that is very much about them.
Right.
And they can choose and change their mind, and it's all right to change your mind.
Right. So designing a curriculum for so many people involves a lot of responsibilities. You have to look at things from a very micro and macro perspective at the same time. So how does all this work? I mean, there's of course a lot of compassion towards people that you have to maintain. So how does one achieve this ability to switch between the micro and macro perspective of looking at things? And
Right. So I would say, when we started out, we were literally practitioners, and frankly, we didn't even have any work experience. Particularly me, I was, I think, 21, 22 at the time. So what we did was that, okay, let's get into education, but we're not educators. So how do we do things?
right.
So we did a worldwide research on all the good design institutes across the world. In Europe, when we went to Europe, we felt every European school had a very good cooperation with China. So we went to China, we went to Southeast Asia, we went to America, and the kind of research that we did was not just about, hey, what is the pedagogy they're teaching, or what is the kind of curriculum they're looking at, but also the way the spaces are designed, the way the hierarchical and organizational structures that exist in design education today, how do they work? What are the various things in the design ecosystem, like associations or, design firms? How do they interact with, the education system of a particular region? And that's when, along the way, we met a couple of very interesting people like Professor Paul Heckert from TU Delft. And we, of course, Saurabh's very good friend, Professor Kashi from CEPT University. We met a couple of people who really, brought in a perspective which was so refreshed. Like, I also particularly didn't know, normally people or educators teach in the way they've been taught.
Right.
But, there's a big difference between teaching someone something and making someone learn something.
right.
And yeah, teaching doesn't ensure learning. So everything in our pedagogy revolves around how how a person learns something rather
Right.
than how they've been taught.
Right.
And that's the shift, I think. And I wouldn't say it's like a novelty.
Right.
It happens across the world, but we made a very deliberate effort,
Right.
especially in design education, of how to completely transform the way you teach a curriculum, but also in the way you impart it. Whether it's the interaction between students and faculty members and so on and so forth.
Right. So I've been getting a couple of design related questions, and there's this very interesting question that I think needs a certain level of clarification to an extent. So I came across this quote by Godfrey Hardin, one of the famous mathematicians. He said that beauty is the first test. There is no place in this world for ugly mathematics. And there's this question that has been revolving around that, design is so complicated. There is always an objective and subjective way of looking at things, and people talk about form, balance, proportion. And then there comes beauty, which is, so subjective. And when you hear about it, it's like so soft and subjective to taste. I mean, I can say you like cultural music, I like jazz. It's so subjective. There's no argument about it. So my question is that what is beauty to you? And what is the probable connection between the way something looks and the way it performs?
Right. So I think, and this is something we've always dabbled with, right, in the design space. And personally, in our context, we have come up with a solution or with a theorem but I think that's very universal again. So design is all about aesthetics, like you say, and I'm assuming that means beauty.
Right.
From that point of view. Design is about functionality, the way it works. But currently, the most powerful or the most important part of design is the reason why you do it, or the narrative.
Right.
The story is almost more important than the first two obligations, even though those are taken for granted. So, for example, there is this brand called Tom's, and they make shoes. And what they do is that, their style is nice, simple, clean, but so are many other brands. But with their shoes, they say that if you buy a pair, one pair gets donated.
Oh.
So people buy things today because of the reason why you do it.
Right.
And I think that's a very big differentiator. So it's become like a filter in my mind that if a product is there, you take any product or any service.
Right.
If you understand, okay, hey, it's pretty to look at, yes, pretty generally, and I would argue beauty is subjective or not, because Professor Paul Heckert has done an entire research on how beauty across the world can be very predictable as well.
Right.
And he's defined theorems around that.
Right.
But I just feel that, the story or the why of what you do is so much more important than just the aesthetic of it or the functionality.
Right. So I was reading one of your issues on Stirworld, and you mentioned that pre-industrialization era, any skilled person could be, become as an architect or a craftsman or maker for that instance. So how has the definition of becoming a designer or an architect changed in today's time when it comes to skills?
Yeah. So yes, of course, before industrialization, anyone in the creative field, whether you're an architect, a sculptor, painter, dressmaker, you didn't need education to become something. You didn't need, you just needed experience.
Right.
You just need to work on those things and maybe be an apprentice to someone, and that's how you became. But after industrialization, these became vocations.
Right.
Because there is some merit in it, because you formalized it, you elevated the quality, you benchmarked it and things like that. But at this current moment, when the world is changing so rapidly, I feel that the entire interconnectedness between all of these, you take the example of Michelangelo
Right.
or anyone who was a polymath, they were good at multiple things. Rabindranath Tagore. If you slotted yourself as, okay, I'm just going to do this, then you really limit your horizon.
Right.
And I think for a changing world where today you are practicing in a particular way and tomorrow your career may not even exist, if today the internet goes, half the jobs would go. So I would recommend that, to have a very open mind and a macro way of looking at things.
Right. So designing for a design school and designing a whole new curriculum requires a lot of perseverance, and of course you need to be very resilient as a designer and as a human being at the same time. So how did that sort of take place?
When we ventured into design education, I don't know if I mentioned this before, that we did a research. The first thing we did was, hey, what are the best design schools in the world and why are they what they are? And then we realized certain commonalities with, it has taken some time from them to become what they are currently. And the first thing we did was, okay, made a list, said, let's go meet them. Let's go talk to the various stakeholders. Let's ask those people, because we really believe in interactions and we believe that something like this can only work when you have a collective,
Right.
where you have a lot of people who feel this way and they come together to make something happen. I don't think it can be an individual
Right.
driven effort at all.
Right.
So we went and went to all the good design schools in the world, checked out their campuses, spoke to lots of professors, spoke to a lot of international, exchange managers to even see the ambition of how interested they were in coming to India. Because when we began, we said, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just get the best in the world to India.
Right.
And then on our journey, we realized that, hey, it's not so simple. You need to recontextualize whatever you pick up. And then why should we limit the curriculum to only be relevant for our context? Why can't it be a philosophy for a global village or for a global school? And currently the pedagogy or the curriculum at the design village is very, very open. We change it every year, we evolve it, there are new courses coming out of it.
Right.
And I think it was simple enough to be adopted to a larger cohort, and it was deep enough for aligned people to believe in it, for a long period of time.
Right. So, in today's world, what do you think is the future of fashion, specifically in India, when it comes to mass production, sustainability, and what do you think is how the fashion industry in India is progressing today?
So I think the fashion industry in India leads to mature a little bit. If you go to any landfills in our country or internationally, you will notice that the maximum amount of waste is from the fashion industry or the design industry, basically the creators. And you realize that all that waste is there because nobody thought how a garment would die, how a product, when it becomes obsolete, what would happen to it. And that's why I feel that fashion designers or designers of today need to take the responsibility of how to think of the impact of what they create can have, the long-term consequences. And that, especially for the fashion industry, fashion can no longer be about just a mode of expression. It has to mean more than that. We are looking at today's context, and fashion must have a purpose.
Right. What sort of opportunities do you think lies in India when it comes to education? Because when it comes to numbers, there are obviously a lot of opportunities, but there is a disadvantage to it as well. So where do you think India has the opportunity in the design field today?
So in India, like we know that there are more religious institutions than there are education ones. So the more institutes we open, the better it is, because our population is growing at a very rapid pace. In the design industry particularly, I think, of course, industry centricity, the way you will be employed, all that makes a lot of difference. But we also need people to create new ways in which design, new industries in design. So for example, I can give an example of the design village itself, that traditionally you would say that, hey, what do students' projects look like? They look like, okay, I'm making a garment collection on nature. I am doing a product for maybe water, it's a water cooler and so on. Now, if you look at the projects that students pick, they are about taboo.
Right.
They are about how to bridge the gender biases that exist in our country. How can we make people more accountable?
Right.
How can we ensure that a lay person understands the value of cleanliness? And I think these are all very pertinent design issues. These
Right.
have nothing to do with with non-design things.
Right.
And that's where I feel that we need to also make people who will create new industries. A designer must find his or her place in politics. A designer must find his or her place in governments,
Right.
in non-profits,
Right,
in public, private. So the industry needs a revamp from that point of view, because imagine if a designer was or an architect was a prime minister today.
Right.
It would be a very different world
Right.
that we can give back. There would be preservation of heritage, but there would also be, new language of cities. So I'm just saying that design needs to become a little more ambitious, and I
Right.
would no longer say that, hey, we just need to be industry centric. No, we need to create the new industry.
Right. So how do you think gender plays an important role when it comes to choosing a career in design field? And yeah.
Without sounding stereotypical, I have seen this as a trend that almost 70% of design aspirants are women, and almost all 70% of them choose fashion as a profession,
Right.
and only 10% actually practice. And I think that's a very big waste of 4 years of your life. So
Right.
I would think we should also try to look at more multidisciplinary professions, especially even if you're a fashion designer. If you always wanted to do clothes, but you need to have what is that overriding thing over just making clothes.
Right.
Otherwise, you can spend time with the tailor and get to know how to make clothes. And I think
Right.
that's not. And again, I think this whole deglamming of the fashion industry per se really needs to happen. And it's an advice to women out
Right.
there that, hey, if you choose a profession and you choose a profession like fashion, take yourself seriously and take the next step, and don't
Right.
just stop, or don't just halt your life because something happened.
Right.
Or because you think, the natural progression of life is to get married. And I'm not saying this by any stats that are there. I'm literally saying this from a personal experience, that when I see students come, it's a sad reality that this still exists.
Right.
But I hope to see a change in that, because I've seen lots of people who are now, lots of women taking architecture, product, interaction design, and lots of boys as well, opting for the fashion industry and making a change out there. So
Right.
gender does play a role, but I hope that this whole stereotype will go away
Right.
soon.
Definitely. Those are some really inspiring thoughts, Mridu. Thank you so much for for coming here and having a conversation with us. I'll be dropping a link to Mridu's work in the description below, and you can always ask questions related to design or design field and the education in design. And yes, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.